Hey, it's TV Crazy Man. In this video, we talk about the goofs from all the cool shows of the 70s you may have watched as a kid just like me. That is, if you grew up in the 70s, or maybe later on in reruns. A few of the goofs may have occurred in the early 80s as well, as some of these series ran between the 70s and the 80s. We'll go over shows like SpiderMan, the Dukes of Hazzard, the $6 Million Man, and the Incredible Hulk. Let's get started.
When Spider-Man is climbing the outside of his walls as Peter Parker, it's pretty clear that it's just a giant photo of his house that he's crawling all over in this scene. This next scene is what I would call sort of a narrative goof, I guess, because it just doesn't make sense. Okay, so Spider-Man climbs down the building to save this guy who's about to fall out the window, and instead of pushing the guy back inside the building through the window, for some reason he grabs the guy and climbs back up to the top of the building and sets the dude on top of the building, which kind of doesn't, I mean, it really doesn't make sense. I mean, why would you do that unless it just looked better on film, they thought. By the second episode, Spider-Man starts wearing his utility belt and his web shooter's on the outside for some reason. I don't know why, but he does. I actually liked it better in the pilot when he had the more traditional looking Spider-Man costume. But it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of times when he's walking across the roof when he'll have his utility belt on, or have the web shooter on, you can clearly see it, and then all of a sudden it's gone because they used a clip from the pilot, and it's back on again. As I said, their practical effects were really great back then. But some things, like I guess green screens, weren't so great. Like you take this scene here where Spider-Man jumps out the helicopter. It looks good, especially when they're showing an actual stuntman and stuff. But this one part where he looks like he's just sort of, I don't know, laying flat on a table, it's evidently a green screen effect. It really kind of stands out. Like every other kid that grew up in the 70s and 80s, the Dukes of Hazzard was one of my favorite shows. The show ran from 79 to 85 for 7 seasons and 147 episodes. Now I have to get this off my chest right off the bat before we start. The biggest goof of the show they ever made, in my opinion, was when the decision was made to move the series production from Georgia to California. Sure, it was still a fun show, I'll admit that, but it really lost that feeling of authenticity that it had with the original episodes. Okay, in the very first episode, Cooter steals a police car and is being chased by the Dukes, but as he drives by, it is a police officer in the car, and you can tell by the star that's on his shoulder. Now, they didn't really reveal the fact that it was Cooter until Cooter wrecks the car. Now, this next scene could have been meant for a new Twilight Zone revival, because either the Dukes drove so fast they went back in time and passed themselves, or they went into a parallel dimension. Or maybe the crew just left an extra General Lee lying around. I don't know. Speaking of spooky incidents, in the second season episode, The Ghost of General Lee, Roscoe thinks the Dukes drowned along with the General, so the Dukes pretend to be ghosts and ram Roscoe's patrol car. Now notice the General looks to have sustained some damage, even to the point of the hood popping open. But then in the next scene, the General pulls away without a scratch. Of course, I've always suspected the General was able to heal itself. Of course, we know that in real life, every time the General jumped, the Dodge Charger that played the General was dead. Even though, as far as we saw, the Dukes just drove on like nothing ever happened. And you wonder why 69 Dodge Chargers are so hard to find these days. If you're a big Dukes of Hazzard fan, like me, you've probably seen this jump a million times. I have to be honest, I never noticed this before until I read it on the IMDb. There's a camera attached to the General on your left. It's likely that's what gave us this cool shot of the General in the air. In the second season episode, Hazard Connection, something doesn't seem quite right when Bo punches the bad guy in this scene. It looks like the bad guy is reacting before Bo even gets anywhere near his face. Of course, maybe he was just squeamish. Yeah, I think the threat of Bo's mighty punch was just enough to scare the man into reacting way before the punch. That's what it was. I'm starting to think that Hazzard County is near the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, check out this time jump. See this fella running up to meet his girl? Well, here he is again pulling up in a car. The next explosive goof occurs on the episode The Runaway. Now this is the episode where the Duke boys run Daisy's Roadrunner right off a cliff. Now you know I always like that car better than the Jeep. Now as you can see, the Dukes are clearly alone in the car, which looks to be in the studio. Now I always wondered, why do they ever shoot those outdoor scenes indoors on these TV shows? Well, anyways, just as the Duke boys jump out of the vehicle, suddenly a mysterious figure pops out of nowhere. Now I sure hope he was a stuntman and knew what he was doing, because, you know, that car just goes right off the cliff into a big fiery explosion. In the second season, on the episode Follow That Still, Roscoe P. Coltrane is trying to pull over the Duke boys again, who are driving a tank this time. Now Roscoe wrecks his patrol car, of course, which looks to have lost its police siren, but then it mysteriously reappears the next second. You reckon we can chalk this one up to the Bermuda Triangle theory I have again? Now in the same episode, toward the end, the Dukes are in the tank again, and they find illegal cigarettes inside, which violates their probation. So they start throwing out the boxes of cigarettes until the brakes on the tank give out, and they all have to jump out to safety as the tank heads towards the boar's nest. But there must have been a ghost inside that tank, as the boxes are still being thrown out of the tank right before the tank slams into the boar's nest, and after, of course, everybody's already jumped out of the tank. The next goof involves a car that changes models in the middle of a stunt. Now in this scene from the third season episode, Carnival Thrills, we see Bo about to do a practice jump for a show he's joined. Now I'm not quite sure about the models of the car he's supposed to be driving, but according to IMDb, he starts his jump in a Plymouth Satellite. Then as he gets closer to the ramp, the car turns into a Plymouth Fury. And then once it lands, it becomes a Ford Grand Torino. As he's driving back, it morphs yet again. And hey, if you like classic superhero stories from the 70s and 80s, then check out my new comic book, Liberty Ace, at Amazon. The $6 Million Man was one of the greatest shows of all time, and one of my favorites growing up, but even a perfect show has its technical goofs, small they may be. Sometimes they're actually kind of funny when you think about them. You take this first goof. Steve Austin has just been in a plane crash in the desert. His eyes have been temporarily blinded, even his bionic eye. In this scene, Austin is asking a passenger if he's seen any air rescue. Of course, the script says no. At this point, it's too early in the show for a rescue. But yet, if you look really carefully, you'll notice the sender either needs glasses or this is a goof, because thanks to high-def video, we can see a plane flying in the background at the exact moment the senator claims there are no planes in the air.
Any sign of air rescue?
No, at least not yet.
Well, you want to give it to me straight?
In the episode Act of Piracy, Steve Austin jumps into the water, clearly wearing green socks. But in the water, it appears he's wearing flippers. Now, where in the world did he get those? But then when he gets out of the water, he's completely barefoot. Okay, he could have took his socks off in the water. I get that, but still. In the same episode, the bad guys take off in a boat, and there's only 4 of them. But just a few seconds later, they get another passenger from somewhere. I don't know where. In the episode Stranger in Broken Fork, Steve Austin jumps from a moving truck, but who lands is definitely a stuntman, and definitely not Lee Majors, even though he played a stuntman in his next series, The Fall Guy. This one I think is really interesting. On the second season episode, The Bionic Woman Part 2, during the scene where Jamie and Steve are jumping over a fence, we see a ladder at the corner of the picture that, according to the DVD commentary by Kenneth Johnson, was placed there so that they could jump off of it, thus creating the illusion of jumping over the fence. I think I would have been crushed to know this particular trick as a kid back in the 70s. In the Season 3 episode, The Return of the Bionic Woman Part 2, Steve has nothing with him when he first starts running towards the bad guy's compound, where the Bionic Woman is already. Yet, as he gets near the plant, suddenly he's wearing a side pack, and his shoes have changed from dark to white. I wonder if that had anything to do with the tendency back then to reuse stock footage. I mean, I know they used to have stars wear the same clothing over and over again so they could reuse old shots. Think of Bonanza or Gilligan's Island. In Season 3's The Deadly Test, there's this really cool scene where the 6-man man throws a rocket at a van with a bad guy in it. But if you look really closely, you can see that the rocket is actually on a visible wire as it heads towards the van before it explodes. In Season 3's The Secret of Bigfoot Part 1, if you look really closely, you can see crew members hanging out on the side. Now, in this scene, this is where the 6-man man has chased Bigfoot. He's went into the mountain, he passes out, and the aliens are wheeling him in this gurney. Just keep a close eye on the gurney, on the reflections, and you'll see the crew members staring back at you. In Season 4's Death Probe Part 1, the probe attacks a farmer. The farmer shoots at the probe and then does what people always do in old movies when they run out of bullets. They throw the gun at the monster or Superman or whoever it is instead of reloading it. The probe grabs the shotgun and then starts to turn it. It's then we see what looks to be a gloved hand helping the probe's arm turn. Look at the bottom right and we'll slow it down so you can see it a little bit clearer. See if you can spot this goof from Season 4's episode Danny's Inferno. Austin jumps off a tall building that is under construction with a teenager on his back as he's in a big hurry to get away from the bad guys and stop a bomb from blowing up a dam. Did you spot the goof? Let's slow it down just a little bit more. Notice that the kid's legs on Austin's back have shrunk dramatically. It's obvious that the kid has turned into a dummy. You know, the stuffed plastic kind.
Just a quick note, I'm going to put links to the DVD sets of the TV series we talk about in this video in the description below. Purchasing a DVD set through that link helps out the channel. Thanks. Now let's look at the Incredible Hulk.
In the pilot episode, David Banner, in the very first transformation scene of the series, we find a goof that's so easy to miss. In the scene, Banner is in a terrible mood. It's raining, it's storming, and on top of that, he's just gotten a flat tire. As soon as he gets out to investigate, we clearly see the tire's flat and the hubcap has been blown off as a result. Then Banner goes to get the jack out of the trunk, and as he goes to jack the front of the car up, the hubcap is mysteriously back on. I wonder, did somebody think they were doing a good deed by putting that hubcap back on? I'm not sure. Here's another goof that the eagle-eyed viewer may have seen. Once the Hulk starts to smash the car, the lights go off, which is totally understandable since the Hulk has beaten the car to a pulp. But once the Hulk is ready to pick up the car and throw it down the hill, the lights are back on again. This is the episode The Beast Within where the Hulk battles a gorilla, or a man in a monkey suit, but it's still a cool episode. Now keep your eye on the bottom left. If you're like me and you've seen this episode a million times, this is going to freak you out if you notice this. Just check this out. It's a crewman who just didn't put his head far enough down. It's freaky when you see it. Now from the second episode, which was basically a second TV movie, Banner faces up against a bear and changes into the Hulk. Now despite the small issues I'll talk about in a second, I have to say this scene still comes out a lot more realistically than would happen today. If they did the same scene today, it would be a CGI bear, and more likely than not, you'd just be, okay, that's a computer-generated image. But here, they mingle the use of an actual real-life bear and what appears to be a stuffed bear. Now, the blooper comes from the fact that Lou's makeup is adversely affected by being in the water. You can see instances where it's coming off his skin and where it's wearing off onto the bear. Granted, you have to really be paying attention. Still, I think it's interesting to note some of the problems and challenges they had back in the day when effects were all practical. The next technical goof is from the episode The Disciple, which guest starred Rick Springfield. You know, the highly popular rock star from the 80s who sang that song about wanting Jesse's girl. By the way, he also guest starred in an episode of Wonder Woman and the 6-Man Man as well. I guess he was a big superhero fan. In the second season episode, for some reason Lou Ferrigno is wearing green tights throughout every Hulk out. You can clearly see the Hulk appears to have no toes after the first Hulk transformation, where Banner is placed in a stockade. We see the stockings again when the Hulk escapes from the police car, and lastly, Lou's lack of toes is visible when the Hulk goes into a fiery building. Now the only thing you have to wonder about is why did they point the camera towards Lou's feet, knowing he was wearing stockings like that? Now in the first season episode, Terror in Times Square, if you look closely, you'll notice that Lou Ferrigno is wearing green sneakers, which of course you can't blame him from wearing shoes while running down the dirty streets of 1970s New York. Now the only really big goof I can't forgive with this episode is the fact they missed a golden opportunity to have the Hulk meet SpiderMan, who was at least supposed to be in New York City on screen. In actuality, they filmed most of that series in LA, but still, it fit the Hulk's location in the story and could have been the very first major Marvel superhero team-up on screen. There was another footwear blooper in this episode. Again, if you look closely, you can see Banner wearing shoes right after he transforms back from the Hulk. I guess Bill Bixby was also worried about stepping on something sharp or disgusting in 1970s New York. Okay, in the second season premiere episode, Married, which is one of the best episodes in television history, in my opinion, there is one very curious blooper in particular I thought was kind of neat. In one of the dream sequences where Banner is trying to gain control of the Hulk, Lou smashes open a vault door. If you look really closely at the door as it falls, you can see where the darn makeup came off his hand into a Hulk-sized handprint. Yeah, and my wife fusses about my handprints on windows. I don't have anything on Lou Ferrigno in that department. Okay, in the episode Life and Death, in this scene we see the Hulk jumping down an elevator shaft. According to my research, this is a stuntman instead of Lou Ferrigno, but that's not the reason I think this could be considered a goof or a blooper. It's just the way he's jumping down the elevator shaft. It's almost like he's disco dancing the Boogie Woogie or something. Now in this scene from the TV reunion movie The Incredible Hulk Returns, it's clear that it's a stuntman and not Lou, who is probably cut even better for this movie than he was in the original TV show run. In this scene from this episode, safety wires are visible as the Hulk pulls up two puny humans. In the pilot episode, the Hulk attempts to save a little girl from drowning, who clearly is actually a grown stunt woman. Being a big Cobra Kai and Rocky fan, I couldn't pass this one up, even if it is a little bit small. In the first season episode, Final Round, the great Martin Kove guest stars. You know him as the big bad guy from the Cobra Kai series and the Karate Kid movies, John Kreese. Of all things, Kove plays a boxer named Rocky, not to be confused with Stallone's Rocky. By the way, Kove also starred with Stallone in the second Rambo movie. Now the goof occurs when Rocky is thrown against what is supposed to be a brick wall that gives in like, a wall built for a stage. The really interesting thing about this episode, of course, is that Kove actually plays a good guy. I guess I'll just leave that in. It's a blooper on a video about bloopers. Yeah. Did you spot the blooper in that scene? Bloopers can happen in any TV show, no matter how good they are.
Now let's look at some goofs from Wonder Woman, starring Linda Carter.
Okay, in this first season episode, Wonder Woman is catching a grenade thrown at her by the skin-diving Nazis. She catches the grenade, she throws it away, it explodes. Now where's the blooper, you might ask? Well, take a closer look at where the grenade landed and where the explosion occurred. They are actually two separate locations, which obviously shouldn't be the case. In this scene, it looks like a stunt woman is being launched in the air and then they're cutting away to Linda Carter for the close-up. But what the heck is that dark figure in the background? Is it Bigfoot? I mean, is it a ghost? Is it just a stagehand helping her be launched in the air? What is going on here? You be the judge. Okay, in the Season 1 episode, The Feminine Mystique, Part 1, there's two bloopers visible. Okay, first Wonder Woman is shown outdoors with a dark-colored wall behind her about to deflect bullets. Then just a second or two later, we see Wonder Woman standing in front of a blue background. Most likely inside a studio. You could even see her shadow behind her on the wall. Then it cuts back to the MP and back to her, and now all of a sudden she's back in front of the dark wall outside again. Now if you look really close, you can also see a special remote in her hand that triggers the sparkling fireworks effect when bullets are supposed to be hitting her bracelet. And these days they would just use CGI. But still, you have to admit, sometimes practical effects register with your eye as being more real than computer-generated images do. Now in the second season episode, The Deadly Toys, Wonder Woman is shown lifting up the back of a van as the bad guy tries to speed off. But just for a second, if you look closely, you can see that the van is actually jacked up in the back. In the season 1 episode, Wonder Woman vs. Gargantua, a stool magically disappears when Diana Prince transforms into Wonder Woman. I wonder, was the stool completely destroyed when she turned into Wonder Woman? But then how did all the other furniture survive? Now back then they would use rolling tables to make lifting heavy people look effortless for Wonder Woman. Now look really closely towards your right at the man's hand and you'll see the edge of the table. For some reason on Wonder Woman they would sometimes use real people and sometimes use dolls in the invisible plane, which this is really noticeable if you're watching Wonder Woman on a big screen TV. Okay, watch out in the season 1 episode, Wonder Woman vs. Gargantuan, the man that the ape is supposed to be carrying down appears to be a dummy. That is, until he gets down off the building, and then instantly you can tell it's the actor again. Now in the episode The Bermuda Triangle Crisis, season 2 episode 4, Wonder Woman drops a mine into what is supposed to be the ocean. But if you look really closely, it's obviously a swimming pool, which is really evident if you watch this scene on a big screen TV, the size of which did not even exist when the show first aired, which is why most of us never noticed a lot of these bloopers back in the day. Just want to say thanks for watching TV Crazy Man channel, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and the like button. Oh, and just a friendly reminder, I am also not only the man that is crazy over TV, but I also like to write and draw. So if you get a chance, check out my sci-fi novel series, The Time Cruisers, or my family-friendly graphic novels like Caveman Comics or The Monkey Monster Man. It's all at Amazon under my secret identity of that of mild-mannered Tim Frady. Thank you. Thank you very much.